Hi everyone, and welcome to this panel on raising our voice for the SDGs. I'm super excited for this webinar panel today, and I hope you are too. The purpose of this webinar panel is to gain a more global and comparative perspective on the Swedish follow-up on the Agenda 2030. And how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the implementation of the Agenda 2030 and how we can proceed with recovery. I am your moderator today, and with me today we also have eminent speakers from all around the world that will join me on this conversation. They will present themselves when it's time for their topic, because today we have 3 topics and we have approximately 3 speakers for each topic. The first topic will be climate, and thereafter we will speak about inequality, and after that we will speak about global health. Apart from being your moderator today, I am the Swedish youth representative to the UN. So at the UN's high-level political forum where the Agenda 2030 is followed up, I am the youth delegate. And I have been a part of the process following up to this year's HLPF that will take place in July this summer. And a part of the consultations with youth organizations and with young people that LSU and the UN Association has done together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And in this, I've also had my eminent colleague Daniel Samuelsson with me. So between the 6th and the 15th of July this summer, 43 countries, together with Sweden, are expected to present their voluntary national review on the work of the Agenda 2030, VNR. This panel, we will speak about how Sweden has followed up the work on the Agenda 2030 together with the Swedish UN Association and LSU. We have been a part of making contributions with the support from the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So within this framework, we arranged this panel where you will have the opportunity to discuss these areas. The topic of the high-level political forum this year is sustainable recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. In the world, we know that many of the progresses made so far for sustainable development has been pushed back or been delayed by the pandemic. And we know that the road from recovery from the pandemic will be long as we mourn those we have lost. But perhaps, maybe, the pandemic also means an opportunity to create a more sustainable and inclusive society. And this is also what we will touch upon today and talk about. So with this, I will open up the first panel discussion and the first topic of today, which is climate. And we have guests with us, and I would ask you to present yourself and your organization. And we will start with Ellen.
Yes, so my name is Ellen, and I'm a youth ambassador for the UN Association of Sweden, Svenska FN-föreningen. And that's why I'm here.
Thank you, Ellen, and welcome so much. Thank you. Then we have Nun with us.
Yes, thank you. Hello, my name is Nune. I'm from AUNA office, Armenian UN Association. I'm an active member of youth division of AUNA. And I'm very happy to talk about climate and climate change today with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you too, and welcome so much. I'm also super excited to talk about this. So climate change is a real threat to us all, and green gas emissions continue to rise, and the effects are already visible. And we know that the effects will be catastrophic unless we act now. So what do you think is the biggest challenge when it comes to Goal 13 on combating the climate change and mitigating its impacts? I start with you, Nuna.
Yes, I think there are actually many challenges that we are facing for achieving Goal 13, but I will be short and present the ones that I think is one of the biggest challenges. And one, I think, is the competing interests. For example, those affected in the short term, such as fossil fuel or mining companies and their workers, will perceive themselves as loser if they are forced to change, even though society as a whole will be a winner in the long term by avoiding the tremendous risks and impacts of runaway climate change. So always conflict of interest, competing interest is playing a big role in achieving and combating climate change. Second, I think that there is a lack of education and lack of awareness, and which is leading indifference from the people, because if they don't know what are the effects of climate change, they will usually will not care, and in the end they will just face the consequences, and it's very serious. So I think lack of education and lack of awareness is playing it's a biggest challenge for achieving Goal 13. And the third one that I want to talk about is about the leaders, world leaders. For example, we had in the United States there was Trump, who just he withdrew USA, which is like the second largest emitter of CO2 in the world, from Paris Agreement. And if we have such irresponsible leaders who in some ways reject the climate change, it will seriously affect all other countries, especially developing countries. Yeah, that's it from my part.
Thank you so much. I think you touched upon really interesting and very important topics: the conflicting interests, and leadership. And yeah, I think we will come back to these indeed. Super important. And I pass the same question to you, Ellen. What is the biggest challenges with Goal 13 on combating climate change and mitigating its impacts?
I'm very with Noon on this. You lift up very good topics, and I would like to start with, do you think that we were very close to a social tipping point where consumers and especially young people understand that the issue and are doing a lot? That's not, but just as Noon said, we do need the big companies, and we do need the bankers, and we do need the people that have a lot of power themselves, and the people that have the big money. We do need them as well to make a big difference, and that is very important and something that needs to lift up more. And I would really like to talk more about that with you as well. What you said about Trump and the importance of that. And I do think that thanks to the movements like activists and the young people, just like Fridays for Future, and we do have a lot of things happening, but we can't wait for that generation to actually make the difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. I think you also touched upon really important questions. So both of you talked about how we can't wait for the power holders of today to shift to kind of we need the power holders today to act. We can't wait for the Fridays for Future movement or for young people today to become power holders, because we need to act now, because we're in a hurry. it's very urgent situations. So how do we make sure that the power holders of today and the leaders of today act? What do you think, Nina, or any of you?
I think the one thing as a youth, or I mean, doesn't matter if we're youth, anyone, we should hold accountable those who are responsible for the climate in general. But as Ellen mentioned, there are a great movements who push towards combating the climate change, and it's very important because it also shows that we are not going to be silent, and we are going to hold those leaders who have a big stake in decision making. We are going to make them responsible for the climate change. And the methods are different. It can be a movement. It can be like trying to educate people to wake up, because some people actually, it's for me very sad that some people don't realize the seriousness of this question, and that's why some people doesn't even care. And yes, and if we raise the awareness, if we see more active members, then we will be able to hold accountable our governments and like more, I would say, the leaders who have big stake in this issue in general.
I can continue there, that the responsibility needs to lie on the countries and the big companies that have the biggest ecological footprint, that uses the most resources and have the biggest emissions. And that is really important, that the people actually who have done the biggest change beforehand needs to have the money now and needs to make the big difference together with the rest of us. And it's really important, just like you said, that we need to raise awareness and talk about these issues every day, all the time, with everyone, including the people with the money and with the power. And they need to actually step in as well.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, both of you. I think you touched upon really something important here, like holding the power holders accountable, and how those who are responsible are states and companies. And we did a youth consultation this spring with young people as part of the VNR process, as I talked about before. And in that, it was very clear that young people want to hold states and companies accountable, and want them to take responsibility. I was thinking, do you think that, because as we talk about these problem, with problems with climate change, do you think that the world leaders, you said, both of you said, like the awareness is low, some people don't care. Why is that? Why don't people care about this this catastrophic developments that we are seeing, and that is super clear now and has been for so many years? The science is very clear. Why don't you think that power holders and different actors don't care? Why is that? Ellen?
The thing is, I do think that they care. I do think that they care a lot, because if they don't, that would affect them economically later on as well. And I do think that people actually do understand that. But I also think that the big stakeholders needs to act quicker. They don't really treat it as a crisis the way it is already. And they also need to like stay popular. Like if people are still like lazy, they want their everyday life, and they do want to do what they can and what they think that they have the resources for. And being the big stakeholder on that, it's hard to it could be hard to still have your like power and people to like you. And I think that's part of the big problem, especially when it comes to like political big stakeholders, that needs to people to be with them.
Definitely. What do you say, Nina?
I absolutely agree with Ellen. I think it's what I would say, but also, of course, money plays a big role. For when it comes to big companies, they think, oh, it's better to have like more employees to give people the opportunity to work and etc. etc. It's work for the country's GDP. Money wise, they think it's more important than caring about the environment. So they are trying to say people, oh, if you want to save poor, then let's save the environment. But they're not mutually inclusive. So in the end, if you exploit the environment, it will fire you back. And yes, but for me, I think money is playing very important role, especially for the big companies. They care about money, and that's it.
Definitely, and I think here you touch upon conflict of interests again, how both of you, like how money and wanting to be liked and wanting votes and such play a role in, even though they might care, as you say, Ellen, or you do think they care, but there's other interests as well that plays a role. But do you think now during the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen the world turn upside down in many ways, and we have seen how fast and rapid changes can happen and how fast states can implement restrictions and on their societies and on people's behavior and on their behavioral patterns and how fast things can go. Do you think that this momentum means that we can see a more sustainable world after the pandemic? Or do you think that's not possible? Or do you think that we can leave the pandemic as a more sustainable world or on a more sustainable path than before? What do you think? I open up for any of you.
I think that something that we have learned, at least, is that if we can and if we want to, and if everyone needs to be with us, it is possible to make a big difference very quick. And I think that even if the world's opening up and maybe people do go back to their old behavior, I think that we at least know that we can make a big difference. So it's the big stakeholders, as we talked about before, they know that everyone's with us when we want to, and then we can actually make a big difference and quickly. And also talking about what we talked about before about the economy, if we know that's a very big topic as well, but if we know that we can make a difference, we can also change that behavior as well. If we decouple, the environment shouldn't be dependent on our economy. And that's a big difference we can do as well, that we've learned that we can do quickly. And it shouldn't be dependent on nature and the environment.
That is so true. What do you think, Nina?
Yeah, I think that everything is possible and we should work for the sustainable future. And if we stay pessimistic and say, no, nothing will happen, then in the end, nothing will happen. But we should act now, today, and each of us have its stake. So we should not only say it's the government or big companies. It starts from us. The change starts from us. And I believe you said in the beginning that actually, yes, COVID-19 had a little positive, maybe temporary impact on environment because people started to travel less. People switched from offline work or offline education to online education. And actually COVID in somehow taught us that it's possible to travel less. It's possible to learn online. So maybe if we can change our behavior, it will help us to have more sustainable future for everyone.
Yes, I think it's really important to be optimistic and to remember that the change starts from oneself, and that everyone can make a difference, and that we still have time. But do you think at the same time that that it is important to at the same time be pessimistic about some aspects of the climate change and the involvement that, or the development we see unfolding, where we see how at the same time not enough is being done, and Sweden had the first climate conference in the 70s, and as many of us, I have been watching climate documentaries since I was a child, and been like super aware about what has been happening, but we see how it just goes in the wrong direction very rapidly. So what do you think about that? Like how to stay optimistic and at the same time pessimistic? And yeah, what do you think?
I think it's important that we need to be realistic. We need to like see what's actually happening. We need to listen to the science, and everyone needs to do that. Just as you lifted up, everyone is change, and we need to be realistic. It might not look very good, but if we are getting pessimistic, maybe people just don't think that we can make a change either. We need to be optimistic, and we need to think that we can make a big difference. That is important, but we also need to be realistic with what the science says.
Exactly, yes, I agree. And also, no, yeah, being realistic is very important, but pessimistic I mean, I think that realistic is the main thing that we should be. It's just seeing the things as it is. It's not like, oh, it will become better, but for making it better, we should work today.
Your sound, I don't know if anyone else here. Nuna's sound is there. No, it's freezed.
Oh.
No, now you're back. No, could you please repeat the last thing you said, Nuna? We don't want to miss anything of your voice.
I said that I agree with both of you about, but what Ellen said is very important to stay realistic and see the things as it is. And no, I don't think we need to be pessimistic, but we should be self-aware, and we should realize that if we don't act today, then of course the future will be very vague and bad. But I mean, optimism helps us to work and to hope for the best. I mean, it sounds very like nice, but we should work on it. I think words are nice, but we need to work. It's something that we as humans and governments are not doing enough. That's why environment is in a vulnerable situation, and also the people. You know, usually the people who affect harm less the environment, they are the most vulnerable ones, and that's a big issue, I think.
Definitely. I think both of you answered that really wise and concretely, that it is about being realistic, being self-aware, and that optimism can spur action, and action will follow when we actually think that it is possible. So I think I want to make it even more concrete, and also follow up on this self-awareness. Like, how do you think that you and one concretely can work to reduce climate change and be a part of the change oneself from where you stand? Nuna, do you want to start?
Sure, sure. I personally already changed my behavior, so it's like using like being aware that how much water I use. I mean, it's in very small and simple things. When you brush your teeth, care about the tap water, then using public transport or just walk or bicycle, using bicycle, trying to travel in the places where I can use train, which is harming the environment less. And also teaching and talking with my friends, with my parents. I see that in the oldest generation, they don't really know much about the climate change and I just talk about them and try to teach about the plastic pollution. And we changed in our house the plastic bags, so each of us have this reusable bag, and I think it's very important. And in Armenia we have problem with the recycling, and we are trying to do our best to have as much as possible recycle bins and teach people about the harmness of the plastic and also the other things that can harm our environment and also affect globally other people. That's it.
That's great, concrete examples. And you, Ellen?
I really think it's important what you said, like thinking about your own transport and the way you eat, and just as you said, talk about people that aren't as over. Make your own little movement at home and with your people and with your families. But I would also like to go back to, like, come back to all the SDGs in this. That if you are actually aware about it, by decreasing your own consumption and production in goal 12, you make a big difference. And by knowing about biodiversity and healthy oceans, you make a big difference on goal 13 and 14. Like doing the little things and actually knowing what you're doing is making the difference, and you can do it here and now. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ellen. I think both of you touched upon really good concrete examples. I'm 100% sure that both of you are role models where you in your where you are at in society, and that you are raising awareness around you, and that you are combating climate change. It sounds like both as political citizens and also as consumers. I now want to touch upon the topic of climate justice. We have talked a little bit about who is responsible the most for the climate change, and that it is affecting people differently all around the world, globally, and also nationally within our countries. It is hitting hard. It is hitting groups differently. So do you have examples on how to combat climate change and at the same time ensure climate justice?
Do you want me to start?
Yes, sure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I think the one thing that UN is, with the SDGs is trying to teach us is inclusiveness. And I think with this issue, we should ensure the effective participation of affected people and communities in the planning, discussion, decision-making, and monitoring of climate action. And we should understand that communities should be considered as subjects of rights, but not simply as objects of protection projects and actions. So, inclusiveness is very important, and taking and ensuring that their opinion is evaluated and is taken into account. Also, the second thing, I think that we should secure the equitable fund sharing among the countries that are mostly affected. They should, in those countries we need to monitor more, and also dedicate a lot of of money, but of course with the monitoring and seeing that it's really helping the communities to be resilient towards climate change, and again raising awareness among them. But I think those people who are affected by the climate change, they are the ones who mostly aware because they live with it. And the only thing that we need to make sure is to count their voices and their opinions. It's very important. If one concrete example, I mean, in Armenia, there is a gold mining place, which is called Amulsar. It's in the south of Armenia. And when the company wanted to open this mining, people started to, there was a lot of activities, and we end up stopping the opening of that mining company. But it's still, they won't because of the money. And the interesting thing was the people who were living far away from that mining, that they wanted that mining to be open because it was far from them. They were not really understanding what's going on. But the people who were living there, it was very important that in the end their voice was counted, because the air will be polluted and they will lose, probably they will migrate, because the mining, I think it harms the environment very badly. So yes, I mean, again, ensuring their involvement in decision making, it's very important.
Definitely. Do you want to continue, Ellen?
Yeah, I can just continue with saying that I think it's really important that everyone understands and listens to what Noon just said. It's really important to include everyone. It's about, it's a global thing going on, and even the most vulnerable are a really important voice. And to add something onto that, it's also really important for the people actually making the big emissions and everything to understand that the most vulnerable people aren't most often the people making the biggest emissions. So it's important to actually step in and take the responsibility to understand that it's the big emitters that needs to stop. Yeah. But I could just, what Noon said is really important as well. Everyone's voice, and it's really important to be listened to.
Definitely. I think both of you touched upon a really important perspective when it comes to combating climate change, that everyone needs to be included, and we need to have a right-based perspective, and we need to monitor who is most affected and how we can mitigate the impacts there. And also the very much important perspective on how everyone's voice needs to be heard in decision making. And I think you, Noon, said it so well when you said that the ones who are the most affected are the ones who are the most aware. And in my experience, that is really true. It is, I would say, at the same time, the ones who is less affected, or the least affected, are the ones who needs to get more and more awareness. At the same time, the people who are in the local community, people have, I think, both the most awareness and also the solutions to many of the problems. And also you, Ellen, who finished off by saying the big emitters needs to stop. I think that is really true. I think we touched upon really important topics today. I think we've discussed many aspects of climate change and Goal 13 and the pandemic, and on optimistic and pessimistic perspectives on on climate change and what oneself can do to reduce climate change. It was really fun and interesting to listen to you, both of you. You said super, super important stuff, and I would gladly like to continue this panel and talk about climate change more, but we also have two other very important topics that will follow this panel. We have inequality, and thereafter we have global health, and now we will take a pause for 10 minutes to 10:15, and then we will continue with the inequality panel. But thank you so much, Nuna and Ellen, for this panel. It was really nice to see you, and I hope we will meet again and continue to talk about this again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you too. It was very, very interesting and important talk. Thank you. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you so much, man. And Sophia.
Bye. See you, and now we'll take a break. Hello and welcome to the second panel today that will be on inequality and the goal 10 in the agenda 2030. And with me now I have 2 or 3 different panelists than in the previous panel discussion. So I would like to start off by asking you to introduce yourself and your organization, please.
If no one minds, I will start. Yes, I'm Inessa from Armenian United Nations Association. I work as a coordinator, coordinating the Empowering Youth for Human Rights and Development project in Armenia. And thank you for this great opportunity and hope to have a fruitful discussion with my colleagues from around the world.
Thank you so much, Inessa. And we continue with Reynold.
Hi, good morning. My name is Reynolds and I work with the United Nations Association of Tanzania as a Secretary General. And I'm glad to see there's a lot of youth in the discussions. So I'm more than happy to be here and give my inputs in the discussions.
Thank you so much, Reynold. And we're very happy to have you, both you and Inessa here, and also Oscar. Will you continue?
Yes. So my name is Oscar, and I'm from Sweden. I'm a Goodwill Ambassador for UNA Sweden. And as you said, I'm also looking forward to learn a lot from you, Reynold and Inessa. It will be very fun. So thank you.
Thank you too. So now we have goal 10 to discuss. And goal 10 about inequality highlights the importance of working for a society where no one is left out, where we have a fair distribution of resources and equal rights and opportunities. So we start off with the very big question of what is the biggest challenges, do you think, to achieve the SDG 10? And I open up the word for any one of you who wants to take on this question.
Can I start?
Yes,
Sorry.
You're welcome, Inessa.
Okay. So yes, it's a really general and very big question, not only regarding the SDG 10, but in general Agenda 2030. But I would try to be short, just mentioning the main valid points that I think are the main challenges for achieving the SDG 10, inequality. So first of all, I will mention instability, global instability and uncertainty in the world. Under this, I will highlight the conflicts, the political turmoil going around the world, the geopolitical tensions, the financial crisis, and for sure COVID-19 pandemic, which has deepened existing inequalities, not only in one country, not only in Armenia, but around the whole world, hitting developing countries, I think, the most, and the poorest and the most vulnerable communities the hardest. So it has put a spotlight on socioeconomic inequalities, on significantly increased unemployment and limited progress made on gender equality or other sphere of equality. So inequalities has deepened for vulnerable populations and countries that have weaker health system and those facing humanitarian crisis. So for us as well, because we had passed through war recently, so we had these two huge challenges, COVID-19 and the war, and deepening inequalities. The second one, I will highlight the implementation process of the SDGs, mentioning that the government should ensure programs to fit the local context. So while we are speaking about this global Agenda 2030, we need to ensure programs fitting to our local context. As you know, it's both for developing and developed countries, so it's not only for developing countries. So the local context is often utmost importance, I think. And third one, I think governance, such as political will to transform development programs into sustainable long-term practices, and I mean to turn political plans to strategies into political plans and strategies into reality. So not having these very beautiful national action plans for implementation of SDGs, but also to have it in practice, from theory to practice, I would say. And but while saying governments and national governments, I don't mean that they are the only players and they are the ones that are responsible for the agenda. The long reach of global supply chains also give the private sector a huge potential to lead the environmental sustainability and labor conditions across the globe. And on the other hand, I think that civil society had a vital component of the social pact between governments and citizens, and often uniquely civil society is able to evaluate government's progress project and also make them ensure their transparency, accountability and inclusiveness. And I think these all three actors, governments, the private sector and the civil society will have a role in making progress and meet these challenges towards the implementation of the Agenda 2030 by forming multi-stakeholder partnership and in cooperation with national governments and holding them accountable, transparent and inclusive. I agree with my previous panelist colleagues that this inclusiveness and accountability, if we meet this, we'll meet them, will somehow have success stories, I guess, so, to overcome these challenges on our way. Sorry if I took a long time, so I will pass the floor to my colleague.
No problem, Enisa. I think you touched upon super important big challenges that we see to achieve all of the SDGs, really. You talked about the global instability, deepened inequalities, but also biggest challenges to achieve the Agenda 2030 strategies and to make it a reality and not only words. And you touch upon many more important subjects, also the local context and so on. But I will give the floor to Oscar or Reynold, any of you.
If I might speak. Yeah.
Yes.
So I would like to continue when my previous speaker has left. But I would like us to go a little bit back and sort of define what is inequality and what Goal 10 intends to do is to reduce inequalities between, within countries and between countries. So it's a bit broader. So it's within countries, it means within the people in a certain countries. So reduce inequalities like that, and also reduce inequalities between countries, reduce inequalities that exist between Sweden and Tanzania, reduce inequalities that exist between, Armenia and Tanzania. So I think that is what Goal 10 intends to do, and I think it's a very important goal. All the SDGs are equally important, but you cannot have sustainable development anywhere where these inequality exists. So I feel like this is a very important discussion, and this is a very important goal. So my sentiments on the challenges are, almost as equal as what the previous speaker has said. You still have laws and regimes that are oppressive to people. that do not recognize things like gender equality. You have regulations that do not promote income, bridging the pay gaps between male and men and women. You still have all these things that still exist today in all our countries in the world. I would say there's no country that has been able to bridge things like to close completely things like the pay gap between men and women. So these are big challenges. We still have these laws, we still have these policies that do not promote, um, you know, uh, equality within countries. But then you still have the international community. There's a big challenge where now, how do we close the gap? For instance, the inequality gap between developed and developing countries. This is a huge challenge when the goal is speaking about reducing that inequalities that exist between countries. So you go back to international community. How do we come together? The international community comes together and bridge this gap. And is it something realistic, to reduce this gap? So I would say those are challenges, but also COVID-19. I would say COVID-19 came in and sort of undone, did some damage to the progress that had already been made within countries and within the international communities. You have, you know, when you speak about inequalities, we've all suffered issues like unemployment because of COVID-19 in our countries. But you have countries like the US, which has stimulus packages for its citizens, and then you have countries like mine, which when COVID-19 hits, it was a bit different. We're just starting now to take concrete steps, in addressing the pandemic, including releasing data and the president and the government, acknowledging the pandemic and starting urging people to take appropriate, protective measures. Right now, it's 1 year plus within the pandemic, so that is also an issue. Like developing countries, you could have programs that, social protection programs like stimulus packages to citizens that help those who are most vulnerable to recover or reduce the burden of unemployment, of losing income. But when you come to some of these developing countries or poor countries, you don't have programs like those that go directly to citizens. So now you continue to increase the gap, the inequality gap between a U.S. citizen who has suffered um, the effects of whose income has been affected by COVID-19 and Tanzanian citizens whose income has also been affected by COVID-19. So these are challenges. Another challenge I'd say is data. In most developing countries, there is challenge of having disaggregated data. Uh, if you want to reduce inequality or end inequality for good, you need data. You need to know how many people are vulnerable, which one need extra help for them, to come to a place where they're all equal. So lack of data. I've been struggling today. I tried to research to find even data that is harmonized to look at the East African region, for instance, and I could not find any data that speaks about the East African region, for instance, and the unemployment issues and the gender gaps that exist. So with that question, I would say that the laws, both at national level and international commitments, and the issue of data, for me, those are the biggest three, I would say, challenges. And COVID-19, actually, four biggest challenges right now. COVID-19 for taking us back, where progress has been made, in terms of, as I said, even gender equality. If you look at it, we've seen cases around the world, raising cases of, gender-based violence, partner, violence. So for me, I think for that question, I would stick to those points.
Thank you so much, Reynold. You touched also upon super important topics that we will sure return to. So I think you started off by asking what is inequality really, and that the statement "you cannot have sustainable development anywhere with any inequality." And really pinpointing how central this goal 10 is to all of the goals in the agenda, and how central the leaving no one behind principle is to all of the goals in the Agenda 2030. And you also touch upon different COVID-19 strategies and how data disaggregation is super important for increasing the visibility. And also you touched upon gender, which I also want to return to. So thank you so much for that. I now give the word to Oscar and the question of what is the biggest challenges to achieve the SDG 10?
Thank you. Yeah, well, I totally agree with what the earlier speakers have said. And yeah, SDG 10, it focuses a lot on inequality and discrimination among marginalized groups. And I feel as a white heterosexual male, I don't believe in many ways that I'm in a position to honestly share these groups' perspectives or believe that I would understand their experience. However, what I would like to highlight is the need to decompose toxic masculinity, which I believe plays a large role in this problem. And to tackle this, I believe we need to focus a lot on education, role models, and mostly honest conversations between boys and men. But as Reynold also said, the gap is getting bigger, and I believe there are three big things because of this, especially amongst the Western countries. It's individualistic culture, toxic preconceptions, but also a shrinking democratic space is also globally a problem. So I think many Swedes recognize the feeling that you hardly know your neighbor. And I think this is, I think it's a common feeling that it's better to stand out than stand together. And the problem with this individualistic culture is then that we miss out on conversations which then creates preconceived perceptions of each other instead of learning from honest conversations. And I think this is extra visible with the backdrop of the Corona pandemic, which has been a time that we really need to care about each other and understand our different prerequisites. But then also, as I said, toxic preconceptions. I think that is kind of like the bad thing that has developed with individualistic culture, to not be able to really self-reflect and understand that maybe my perceptions of certain people could actually be wrong. And that makes us prestigious and narrow, which then excludes people. And also, as Reynold said, that I believe this is extra problematic with, for example, cyber warfare and like fake news and such, that makes us not really knowing each other. But then also shrinking democratic space, it's restrain political freedom and hamper the possibilities to organize, formulate collective demands and hold governments accountable. I believe inequality, like all types of inequality, shows that the connection of sympathy is broken. And it's usually because we don't see or hear each other's perspectives. And that's a huge problem. yeah.
Thank you so much, Oscar. You also brought along very important perspectives on inequality. You talked about decomposing toxic masculinity and the importance of role models and the individualistic culture and how sympathy is broken, but also about the shrinking space of democracy and so on. So very much relevant topics when it comes to this goal 10 inequality. Now I open up if any of you want to comment anything that has been said from anyone else of you. Otherwise, I think we'll continue on because I think it was very interesting that many of you also brought up gender equality, which is also another goal in the agenda, goal 5, which is also a goal that has a lot of importance for many of the other goals. It is said that it has a central importance for 10 of the 17 goals in the agenda. It's very similar to goal 10, which is like central to all of the goals, to achieve all of the goals. And when it comes to COVID-19, to the COVID-19 pandemic and how different social groups has been affected, one of the groups that has been affected, that we know has been affected differently, is girls and women. So I would like to ask, what do you see in your country? How has different social groups been affected, and perhaps the women and girls specifically? So I open up. Maybe we'll take the same order as last time. Inessa.
Thank you for your question. So, as we all mentioned already, so no country in the world was ready to deal with a pandemic like COVID-19, and it left its mark also on Armenia. So while speaking about social groups that were affected mostly, I would mention firstly also having under these target groups, let's say target groups, women, youngsters, and people with disabilities, and everyone. So first group was let's say small businesses, because COVID-19 crisis impacts small businesses more than any other sector of the market. So the situation especially was unfavorable in rural communities of Armenia, because many people lost their jobs and or had to close their small businesses. And also another sector of the economy, tourism, which starting from April has been temporarily paralyzed, hitting the economy and the employment market of the country. And this first factor affected all the target groups, and as I already mentioned, not target groups, but all the women and youngsters and people with disabilities and everyone. So the other social group I would like to mention are students, university and school students, because we mentioned about the positive factors of this online education, but somehow it caused some bad consequences and created some inequalities in our country, because despite all the efforts that were made by the Ministry of Education and Culture and Sport and its bodies and also NGOs working in the field of education, many students were left behind in terms of availability and accessibility of education to obtain their right of education. So many students still especially in rural communities of Armenia, where you can even not find Wi-Fi or some notebooks to attend classes. Many students mentioned that their experience was ineffective and incomplete somehow. And the problem, as I already mentioned, involves both availability and accessibility characteristics. So in terms of availability, the problem lies in the lack of regulatory methods of the online distant education. And I think the latter should have been developed with participation of experts of the field, and also parents and children and all the stakeholders. And also regarding the accessibility characteristics, so many families in rural communities were not able to provide the conditions for children for obtaining this distance education for attending these sessions. So these two groups, I think, were affected the most. Inequalities, they faced inequalities, real inequalities. So.
Yes, so rural communities and students. And I give a short answer to Reynold. And then Oscar.
Thank you. I don't think I have a different answer than the previous speaker. I think the groups that were most affected by the COVID-19 is I think women, children, and youth. I mean, they're the ones who have mostly, jobs that are not very secured, So, for instance, here I would give examples of young people who are working, for instance, in the tourism industry, which has been, badly hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. So, the other groups are the same, small scale businesses. When the big businesses suffer, even the small scale businesses also get hit. But the groups are the same: women, children, and youth. But what is different from here and other places is that the people in urban areas, maybe there are people in rural areas were affected because the urban economies, the urban areas were, also affected. But young people in, working in the formal sector and, in business, especially like in the private sector where, the business went down. So some businesses had to close, some businesses had to, downsize. So I would say young people, but especially those in the formal jobs in business, in the private sector, in urban areas, because we did not have as much. Okay, this is again for lack of proper data, but as much being reported from the rural areas as much as what we've seen in urban areas. So I'll keep it short.
Thank you so much. Super important. And Oscar.
Yeah, well, I agree once again with all the wise words being said. And I believe also like women, young people, but also I believe immigrants having a hard time with the equality at the moment, especially with the pandemic. But as said, I think many youths have lost their earnings because they work in very precarious employment conditions. Many in the service sector, which is very hard affected, and it's usually like the first job they get. So this has been a big problem, which also I believe links to mental illness with the loss of earnings, and which also I believe is a big problem now amongst the youths. I read somewhere that actually like the social costs of mental illness were up to 70 billion Swedish crowns per year. And now it's even more with the rising numbers of youths within mental illness. So it's a huge problem. But then also, I believe there has been, or at least in Sweden, I know that it's been a big problem also with racist undertones around areas with high proportions of foreign-borns, which are pointed out as guilty of higher spread or infection, which is also a huge problem.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, all three of you, for giving me your inputs on who has been affected the most. I think you brought up really important different groups, and also how it looks differently in different places around the world. Even though we've been talking about a very serious matter and a goal in the Agenda 2030 that is not always going in the, or not now going in the right direction. It also gives me a lot of hope listening to all of you three panelists. You are so wise, and you've come up with super important perspectives. So thank you very much. We'll now take a short break of 4 minutes before we return to the last panel, which is global health. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you for this fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our last panel today, which is about global health. So global health is about ensuring, reassuring healthy lives and well-being for everyone in all ages. It is a basic precondition for humans to reach their full potential. And it is so relevant for the economic, social, and environmental dimensions of the Agenda 2030. And perhaps so it is more relevant, or it is talked about more now than ever during the COVID-19 pandemic. So now I would like to welcome our last panelist for today. So if you would like to introduce yourself and your organization.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. My name is Lisa. I am a medical student in Sweden, and I represent IFMSA Sweden, which is the International Federation of Medical Students Associations. So it's an organization that represents medical students globally.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and welcome to this panel.
Thank you.
So we have another panelist with us. I think we have Nadia with us. Nadia?
Yes, I'm here,
Yes, you're here.
but my connection is unstable. But I'm here, yes.
Okay, we hear you for now. So let's hope it continues like that and that your internet is stable. Would you like to introduce yourself and your organization? Nadia.
Yes, this is Nadia Badran from SIDC. It is a healthcare organization based in Beirut. We work with youth, vulnerable young people, among which LGBT community persons, people who use drugs, and people living with HIV. And we target in general vulnerable youth from different governorate in Lebanon. Our organization is based in Beirut, Lebanon, and we do have 2 centers that provide services for these vulnerable groups, among which specialized services on substance use and harm reduction and mental health, and another one more specific on sexual and reproductive health and management for people living with HIV. And in both our interventions, we do have a big work on what is related to advocacy when it comes to the right, sexual reproductive health right, reducing stigma and discrimination, changing policies, developing new laws that can provide like a more tolerant and enabled environment for young people to live in dignity and to access to the healthcare services in dignity and without stigma and discrimination.
Thank you so much, Nadia. We're very happy to have you here today from Beirut. So we will talk about global health, and I start off by asking the not so small question, what is the biggest health challenge for us to achieve the global goals by 2030? Lisa, would you like to start?
Yeah, as you say, it's not a very easy question to answer, as it is absolutely huge. I think that what's so prominent about this pandemic is that it has exposed inequalities and injustices worldwide, within countries, between nations, and it has created a lot of a lot of damage and inequalities as well. And at least to me, the foundation of global health is to respect basic human rights. And that means that everyone has equal right to health. And different people in different geographical locations meet different challenges in their work to attain health. And you need to be able to meet these challenges in different ways. So in order to attain equal access to healthcare, for example, vaccines or antiviral drugs or antibiotics, treatments and examinations and so on, it is a matter of global cooperation and global solidarity, and states with more resources need to support states with fewer without imposing their own opinions on how it should be run, because people in those nations know better what challenges they're facing, and just because they're receiving support from another nation, it shouldn't mean that that nation gets to impose their own opinions. It might be a bit difficult to follow, but essentially those in those areas need to be the ones to determine what kind of aid they need. So it's really a matter of accepting and addressing these global inequalities in order to be able to overcome them, and everyone globally working together.
Thank you so much, Lisa. You are really pinpointing how global health is related to our previous topic or panel discussion that was about inequality, and about and how we need to respect basic human rights, you said, and we need global cooperation and solidarity, and also the local perspective is essential, letting people determine themselves what they need and what they want, and how that has to be a prerequisite for global health. Do you want to answer the same question, Nadia? What is the biggest health challenges for us to achieve the global? Okay, she's not with us. Yes, you're with us. Okay, yes, good. I'm happy.
Thanks God. Okay.
Yes.
Because when I started from the beginning, it was on off. Okay, so thank you, Sophia, for this question. And my colleague now, she just raised a very important point. I would add that the most challenge it's to access to services, access in terms of the availability of the services, the adaptability and the appropriateness of these services when it comes to vulnerable groups and marginalized groups among young people or other beneficiaries or other clients who want to access these services. And I would also more the availability of resources for these people to come to the centers and enjoy the services. So the services either that don't exist, they are not appropriate, or they are not accessible in terms of transportation, in terms of distance for these groups. And we have to have in mind that if the services exist, they are not accessible for everyone, because the people themselves have different needs, and we have to tailor the services to be able to respond to the different needs expressed from the people or from the vulnerable groups themselves. Also, there is something that is internationally, for example, we are like advocating for it, universal access for care, or like we are using this term, when you come to a service, like you come to one place and you can get many services in the same time. So these also are very high target to reach out when it comes to some countries, because the priorities will be different and the governments will not put like support in that services or in another services because they have other priorities. So this also, it is very important to tackle how we can convince our government to put more resources or to
I think I lost Nadia. Do you hear her, Lisa? Or no? Nadia, do you hear us? Okay, we will ask Nadia to repeat that when she is back. So Nadia, if you hear me, just let us know when your connection is back. And I will also repeat what I heard when she is back, when we have her here. But I think both of you touched upon very extensive topics and very crucial topics when it comes to health challenges globally. And I think you, Lisa, also talked about a little bit about whose responsibility it is, global health. You talked about human rights and so on. Would you like to elaborate further on whose responsibility it is to ensure global health?
Again, a very big question, not very easily answered, because I don't think that there's any one actor you can pinpoint the responsibility on. It's all a matter of everyone taking their each individual responsibility, and states and nations play a really important role in this, both nations and global institutions like the UN, for example, but also, for example, NGOs within countries, universities, research institutions, individuals, like everyone has their own responsibility for this. So again, a very vague answer, but I don't think that there's a very concrete way of replying to that question.
Yeah, but I think you answered it very good, and we've been talking about in the different in the previous panels as well. The responsibilities is in many ways shared among different actors, as you said as well. Are you able to hear me now, Nadia?
Yes, I'm really sorry for the connection.
No problem.
Yes, I'm not sure which part I missed it.
I think you were talking about.
I was saying it is important to access to care, and I wanted to mention also a very important thing about the access to services that are free from stigma and discrimination. And this is also a very, very big challenge because not all healthcare providers or social providers or providers from different backgrounds, even physicians, nurses, social workers, and others, are delivering services free of stigma. So we need also to prepare the services where we want the population to go and access the services requested, to be able to offer it to them without stigma and discrimination. And this is also a big aim, and we should reach this point. So we cannot talk about the global health and global access to health without mentioning stigma and discrimination.
Thank you so much, Nadia, for that very crucial perspectives on access to services free from stigma, adaptability to vulnerable groups, and availability of resources, among other things. While you were gone, I was asking Lisa, so whose responsibility is it to ensure global health?
Do you want me to answer this, or is it okay? It is the responsibility of everyone. The government, because I was mentioning the government, they are responsible. The direct ministries who are, this is their portfolio. And also in some countries, for example, in Lebanon, we put a higher expectation from NGOs, from INGOs, and also from UN agencies and embassies that support and UN agencies that support NGOs to survive and to deliver these services. One important thing also that they are like more and more, there is this encouragement to integrate services inside like PHCs, primary healthcare centers that are governmental bodies, or inside some SDGs, social development centers that are part of the Ministry of Social Affairs, for example. This is in Lebanon. This is very important also to have like more community centers available everywhere in the country and are able to deliver the services in hours and in functioning hours and without stigma and discrimination. So it is a collective effort they are to be involved in this. So it is government and UN, INGOs, NGOs, and other supportive organizations.
Thank you so much, Nadia, for raising this.
Sophia, I will add one issue because this is very important now. It is how we can engage more the beneficiaries themselves in the advocacy for their rights to health or right to access work, for example, or employment. So how we can engage them in this is also their responsibility to be part of each advocacy effort, and to give them the voice to be able to raise their voice and to express their needs and to be present in different stakeholder meetings, steering committees, and on that level. This is also a very important point. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia. Yes, indeed, a very great add-on you made there to engage the beneficiaries. And that it is also their responsibility and their right, as you said. Very important perspective to keep in mind. So now the world is experiencing COVID-19, which is a health crisis among a crisis in many other ways as well. But what experiences do you think that the countries of the world should bring from the pandemic in order to continue to work to achieve the global health goal? Lisa, would you like to start?
Yeah, I think that there is obviously a lot to learn from this pandemic that we're through, or that we're going through. One is to understand the value of preparation and to mobilize so we're better prepared for future crises, because a crisis doesn't have to be a pandemic, it can be anything. Basically, like the definition of disaster medicine is when the need exceeds the availability. So to have backups for catastrophic situations with material, education for healthcare workers, national and global strategies that are ready to be enforced at a moment's notice, that is, I think we can all understand the value of that now that we've seen how fragile healthcare systems really can be. So to really work for preparation for catastrophic situations, and to invest more in preventive strategies to prevent pandemics, because we've seen from this pandemic that a whole society can just stop and change and everything is affected. And this has also been harder on marginalized groups. So the pandemic, as we touched upon earlier, has really shown which groups are more vulnerable to situations like this. So to raise awareness and increase knowledge on determinants that factor into general health of individuals and populations, that is really important increase knowledge, increase preparation, and be prepared generally, I think.
Yes, and if I can follow up with a question there, like, do you have examples of preventative strategies and how this preparation for pandemics like this can take place?
For one thing, research into how pandemics happen and because if we know how they happen, we can work with more specific preventative measures. Continuously educating healthcare staff so they're prepared for situations like this. And as I think I touched upon earlier, to have national and global strategies for how to handle situations like these. To have a material preparation, to have a backup storage of supplies for healthcare, so it doesn't have to stop or grind to a halt because we lack the supplies for it, which are just a few of many, because of course this is a multifactorial and a very complex question, but there are concrete strategies that can work to ensure better preparation in the future.
Definitely, and I think you are touching upon a super crucial question that we cannot forget now during this pandemic. We cannot only focus on how to mitigate the consequences now and how we move on now. We still have to keep in mind the preventative perspective and the value of preparation. Because I mean it can happen again and again and again, and we need, as you say, we need research into how they happen. We need healthcare staff to be educated, and we need material and so on. I think you gave a lot of really good concrete examples of what the world can bring from the pandemic to continue to work to achieve the health goals. So Nadia,
Yes.
Are you with us? Do you hear me?
Yeah, of
Yes.
course.
Great. Would you like to answer the same question?
Of course. Yeah, of course. So first of all, I think the most important thing is how to be ready for emergency in the future and for the crisis. And we learned a lot from this COVID-19 because we worked in a quickly. So we responded quickly to different needs for the access reaching to them. So this is also a very important point to do it. Another thing also important is to, are you hearing me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello? You are hearing me? Okay. So in the COVID-19, we did not wait for the people to come to the service because the services, they were on lockdown. So we were outreaching to them, to their houses. We were using a lot of online mediums to reach out to them. Like they were like many services developed, like online mental health, online medical checkups, online psychosocial follow-up, online education. So this is also it was a lessons learned for us how to be creative and innovative foods, for example, and to reach out to the people in another ways. So this is a very important point. Another thing, how to be more responsive and quickly responsive to the needs, how to assure protections for the people and to respond to the basic needs of these people, because responding to these basic needs was very important for the different groups. How to try to be more in solidarity with others, how to develop referrals, how to mobilize others to put their hands into your hands and to be able to engage them in the actions, how to develop like more comprehensive packages of services for the people. The system is very fragile, and we should be more prepared for the future. So these were the points that I wanted to share it with you. And one more point, that when the crisis came, we noticed that we are fragile at different level. We run off stock quickly. We have more and more needs that can be expressed in 1 week that can overwhelming you. We notice that we as a human are very fragile also. So to hear we learned that we need also to be backed up as service delivery people. We need to be supported at different levels. So these are my comments on this question.
If I may, could I add a comment to, which is along the same line as you were, Nadia, that climate change is a part of this too, and you can't talk about global health without addressing climate change, because that creates a lot of problems and obstacles in terms of global health. So a thing like educating more interpreters specialized in healthcare is also really important and essential in preparation, because climate change leads to more migration, which leads to increased diversity among patients that seek healthcare, and everyone has the same right to healthcare. So to have more interpreters in healthcare is also crucial to attain global health.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Do you have any final comments, Nadia?
No, but this were the point that I wanted to raise, and we learned a lot that it is everyone or every structure business working in emergency. It's not only about health. COVID, it is all. We all know that is affect health primary, but it is affect also the whole social system, the whole legal system. Also, the protection of the people was engaged. So all the ministries have to be involved. All NGOs has to be involved. All syndicates has to be involved. All youth groupment, women movements, all of them, they were engaged in the fight against COVID and in responding. So in emergency, we all need each other's.
Thank you so much, Nadia. I think both of you wrapped up not only this panel on global health, but all of our 3 panels that we've had today, which has been climate, inequality, and then global health, by linking these 3 to each other and really pinpointing how global health is linked to climate and to inequality. Thank you so much to both of you. It has been a pleasure talking to both of you. Very wise contributions. And thank you, Nadia, as well, even though I didn't see a video. No, I see a video of you. Nice to see you, both of you, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Bye.
A very good connection.
So now we'll continue with a wrap-up that will last till 11:45 approximately. And I will talk with Desiree that works for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in Sweden. So as I said in the beginning before the first panel, Sweden will present our voluntary national review on the work of the Agenda 2030 at this year's high-level political meeting, which is taking place in July this summer. And during the spring, the Swedish UN Association and LSU has collaborated and coordinated young people's contributions to the Sweden's reporting with the support from the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Within this framework, we are now arranging this panel today, and the report for the voluntary national review is out, and later today the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will officially present the report. So I welcome Desiree today. Thank you so much for being here today. I don't know if you have been following any of the other panel discussions that we have during the day. If you haven't, we will sum up all the wise thoughts that has been brought forward by all the young people here today later. But welcome, Desiree. Would you like to introduce yourself shortly?
Thank you so much, Sophia. I'm so happy to be invited to say hello to you all. I followed this last discussion on global health, and I had unfortunately so many other meetings this morning that I could not follow the other panels. So I would definitely appreciate a little sort of summary as we move into the discussion. But I can maybe start by just saying a little bit about myself and about the team that I've worked with this spring, and how this voluntary national review that Sweden is launching today officially is definitely a reflection of many things that I think you have touched on during this discussion. So I work at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, and I am coordinating Sweden's participation in this high-level political forum, which is the big UN meeting where the countries present their reviews on how well they are on track to achieving the SDGs. And it's a joint collaboration between definitely the whole Swedish government. All the ministries have been involved. We have coordinated the report and our participation with the Ministry of Environment. But I would like to really stress that implementing the 2030 agenda and this report is also a reflection of the need of a whole of society approach. And I think you mentioned this by the end, Nadia, I think your name was, that it's really, we all need each other. We need partnerships, we need NGOs working together, not with private sector, with the government ministries, with all ministries. And I definitely think that this report is a reflection of that need. So I'm really excited to elaborate more on how we are trying to make this vision a reality. But I will let you, Sophia, give me some summary of what you have discussed today more.
Thank you so much, Desiree. I think we can start off by me asking you the same first question that I've asked all the panelists today, because I've started off all the panels by asking the not so small question: what is the biggest challenge to achieve the goal on, and then climate inequality, and then global health? And I think we got some really crucial and extensive answers to these questions. So if I may ask you the same question, but kind of all these topics in one, and then I can continue on elaborating on what the panels have been saying today. So what do you think is the biggest challenges?
Well, I'm going to give you sort of a non-answer. I think the challenges themselves are the problem, so to say, and the solution, because it is something that we have included in this report on our implementation of the 2030 agenda is a chapter on structural issues. And this chapter touches on inequality, climate change, and the COVID-19 pandemic. So it really goes very much in line with these different topics that you have discussed, and how these issues are not only separate SDGs, but that not delivering on them is actually hampering progress on all of the rest of the 17 goals. So if we don't tackle these issues, then we won't achieve the rest of the agenda. And this chapter definitely goes through issue by issue how these link and interact with other goals in the agenda. So I think it's sort of it's a bit of a vicious circle, and what is very clear in the report is that the only way of breaking this vicious circle is to work more integrated, and to actually investigate who is being impacted by these structural issues more and less, and how are these affecting different people, and how do we include their voices? And that's sort of the way forward to actually have a whole of society approach and stop working in silos and including those who are actually affected.
Yes, I think you touch upon really what we've been discussing as well, how all the goals in the agenda is interlinked, and how we need an all of society approach, and how we need to focus on the problems, because there lies the solutions. And we've been also talking about the need to be self-aware, and the need to be self-critical, if so, and also to really highlight where we need to work the most, and who is the most responsible. I think a lot of the talks today has been circling around not only who is left behind and the vulnerable groups, but also who is more responsible for pushing behind. And when I say who, I mean also systems and structures. And so not only focusing on who we cannot leave behind, but also really focusing on where the problem lies. So you were also mentioning this report that will be launched today. So what would you say, the VNR report, what would you say is the best part with the report? You were talking about the holistic approach, and also the parts you wished that could be better, where it's room for improvement.
In the report, or just in our implementation in general?
In the report.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think it's hard to pick out one thing, right? Because the 2030 agenda really involves everything, and I think we have, despite a challenging exercise, managed to really highlight where what the keys are to the solutions. And I want to, of course, start with just saying, like, the voices of youth were something that we managed to some extent to include through this very fruitful collaboration with LSU and with the UN Association of Sweden. And that's also, this panel is a reflection of that and a continuation of that conversation. So what we have included in the report is sort of just an initial indication of what, where the mind of young people lies on these issues, but it's meant to be just a starting point and something that we are going to continue working in. And that's also something I want to say about the VNR process. It's a process, and now we have launched the report, but we really hope that the conclusions will be something we can elaborate and work more on in the years to come, both, you know, nationally in Sweden, but also with our international partners. But you touched on who has the responsibility for not pushing behind. And I think that is a very pertinent question. And, you know, I think that if we're going to have a whole of society approach, we need to ensure that even those who have traditionally maybe not taken the primary responsibility understand why it's important. And that's where we need to create these meeting platforms. And in this report, we have a whole chapter that highlights how Sweden is trying to work on the financing for development agenda. So it's this sort of sister agenda to the 2030 agenda, and it's all about how to finance the SDGs. And in this chapter, we speak about what is the private sector doing, what is the finance industry doing, how can we build public-private partnerships so that the government pushes the private sector in the right direction and also helps to steer their investments towards more sustainable industries, for example. And we have tried the approach of highlighting some good success stories and concrete examples that could potentially be scaled up on a global level, because we think that when we go to the UN to present this report, what other countries are also interested in is to see, do you have any projects that have actually worked? And I think that this chapter is definitely sort of a starting point of showing how those sectors can take more responsibility. And a second thing I want to highlight that is pretty unique is I'm going to use a very bureaucratic term here, but then I'm going to try to put it in simple words. It's a chapter on policy coherence for sustainable development. And what is that? That is sort of this idea that we need to have policies that are coherent. We can't have economic policies that go against environmental policies. We need to have our foreign policy and our domestic policy need to be coherent. They need to go in the same direction. We promote democracy abroad, as Sweden does through like the Drive for Democracy, which is a foreign policy initiative. But we, in the VNR report, we also see that hate crimes are increasing, that we have increased racism and xenophobia in society. So we also have challenges to our own democracy. And I think that this clearly highlights that all the Swedish challenges are global challenges and global challenges are Swedish challenges. So this sort of recognition of this is a big step forward. Sweden has been working with this since 2003, actually, but I don't think it has been so concrete as it is now, that we really need to tackle this in an integrated way. So that's also a very unique part of the report. But if you ask me what could have been done better, I mean, I wish we would have had better preconditions to really have more cross-sectoral dialogue. So throughout the process, we have been able to have stakeholder dialogues with different sectors, like with the business community, with young people, with trade unions, and so on and so forth. But partly because of time limits, but also digital limitations, it has been pretty hard to create these meeting platforms between all different sectors. And that's something we want to, elaborate on more in the future, because as you said before, we need to have those who are pushing behind also seeing why they can't do that, and why everyone needs to be in this together, and sort of see this as an integrated whole, that it's in all our interest to implement this, and those cross-sectoral dialogues are definitely the step ahead that we need to take in the upcoming years.
Definitely. Thank you so much. You touched upon a lot of different relevant perspectives. You talked about coherent policy and sort of like the need to build bridges between different sectors. And you also talked about awareness among those who are kind of pushing behind. And here I would like to raise one of our panelists today, who said that those who are most affected by climate change are those who are most aware of climate change. And I think this is really true also when it comes to those who, where we need to place, where we need to raise the awareness that it is, as you say, the financing sector, the private sector needs to get involved as well, need to take their responsibility as well. So the topic for the high-level political forum this summer is recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. So how do you think that the world can leave the COVID-19 pandemic as a more sustainable place or at a more sustainable path? And if so, how?
You're asking me difficult questions.
Yes, I've asked all very large and difficult questions today.
No, but it's a great question. I mean, this is the theme of all discussions right now. And I mean, this Build Back Better narrative was something that got spread during this year of crisis, but that was actually, I think, from the beginning, a part of, it was presented as part of a Nordic approach between the Nordic countries that had negotiated an approach paper on how to recover and build back better. So that was sort of the backstory that I think maybe not everyone knows. And what was in this approach paper, I think that, there's a saying that you should never waste a good crisis. And maybe this is the example of that. I think we have all seen that we can live a bit more sustainably. I don't think travel will decrease much now that borders are opening again. But I think that we will not go back to completely normal as before. And I think that something that was also very clear is that international collaboration is needed. We need to have a fair distribution of vaccines. Otherwise, the virus is going to mutate and new versions of it are going to spread. So the crisis highlighted what we need to do, but these are things we already knew that we had to do. So the question now is if we will do it. And for this, of course, my own government is highly committed. And we are always trying to show not only, there was a saying in Joe Biden's inauguration speech that I think actually highlights very much how Sweden approaches a lot of our international work, that we want to lead by the power of our example, not by the example of our power. And this is sort of what we try to showcase, that if we build a society with a welfare model that has been, despite its shortcomings, still it has been a crucial part of social resilience. So creating a society for everyone is something that is also important in mitigating crisis. And I think that this is what we're trying to, in every part of the world that we work, that we try to promote. We try to show how Sweden has at least succeeded somewhat in these areas by good examples, and that's the sort of dialogue that we need to have, because I don't think we will get very far by just moralizing and saying that others are not doing things well. I think that it's better to show that what actually works and what can actually be scaled up. But the question now is, will we do? That's something we still need to see.
Definitely, we're not out of the crisis yet. And at the same time, I think we see how fast states, including Sweden, can turn their societies upside down and achieve big societal changes in a short period of time to achieve a goal. And we've really seen how fast restrictions on behavior patterns, on consumerism, and on all of societal sectors have happened during the pandemic. So that really shows how if the state prioritize and want to act, then we can act. So let's hope for action when it comes to climate change and mitigating the impact, when it comes to inequalities and decreasing the gaps, and when it comes to global health and all of the other goals in the Agenda 2030 as well. But thank you so much, Desiree, for joining us here today, and we will give you a wrap up of all of the discussions that we have today later on as well in text. And I would also like to thank all of the panelists today that have joined us. These talks are really important, and it gives me a lot of hope listening to all of you wise people that I've been talking to today, and all of your different perspectives from all around the world and from different sectors in society. You can put your camera on if you would like to. Otherwise, I'll say goodbye to everyone, and thank you so much. Bye.